The following program was sponsored by Guerra Wealth Advisors.
Welcome to Retirement Ready with Guerra Wealth Advisors. The team at Guerra Wealth Advisors has been helping families in Florida get to the point where work is an option and not an obligation. On this show, Sebastian Guerra will help you learn about strategies for creating income in retirement, managing your wealth, and minimizing taxes. Welcome to Retirement Ready with Guerra Wealth Advisors.
Welcome to Retirement Ready with Guerra Wealth Advisors. I'm Kelli Dame. Today, you'll learn a few cutting-edge financial strategies and tips on creating income for life in retirement. Joining me, Sebastian Guerra, president and partner of Guerra Wealth Advisors, serving the retirement planning needs of Miami and South Florida. Sebastian and the entire team helps people just like you and me develop and implement sound financial plans for retirement. Sebastian, great as always to be back here with you today.
Thank you so much, Kelli, for having us here today.
Retirement, huge topic to be talking about today. And so many people are looking forward to retirement, rightfully so. You work so hard trying to get to this moment. And I think some people may have the feeling of, okay, I've made it. It's a piece of cake. Now I get to sit back and relax. But that not necessarily is true, right? There's still some work that needs to be done. Let's talk through that.
Yeah. So I think that one of the first things that we have to stop and think about is what's going to happen when it comes to our expenses and our bills. Because we've been used to working for 20, 30, 40 years, but now we're getting to the stage that we want to retire. But how is our lifestyle going to be affected once we retire? And how are our bills going to be affected? And normally our bills are not going to stop once we retire. We also have to be thinking about things like taxes. What happens if tax rates go up tomorrow 5, 10, or 15%? How is that going to affect us during retirement? What about inflation? What if tomorrow things are double or triple the cost that they are today? And I'm retiring today, but then 10 years in the future, now it's double the cost. What happens if tomorrow my spouse passes away? How is that going to affect me? What happens if tomorrow I end up getting sick? And how am I going to make sure that I can maintain the quality of life throughout all of retirement? And I think this is why it is so important that we all get to this point where we work because we want to and not because we have to. And the only way we can really get there is by building out what's called a freedom plan.
We talked about really big things like taxes and bills. And I think maybe people have this mindset of, oh, I'll worry about it when I get there. It's not affecting me now. And that's why not only just insight, but the right insight is so important. And I think about the way that you and Guerra Wealth Advisors is structured, right? And how you have specific areas dedicated to specific needs. So let's talk about what that right insight means beyond just financial insight.
Yeah. So I think that normally when an individual is trying to plan out this area of their retirement, normally we like to say that there's 5 areas that people really need to be paying attention to. And I think one of the first is, their retirement. As far as when am I planning on retiring? What age am I planning on starting to get Social Security? Am I going to start at 62 or maybe my full retirement age, or am I going to delay it till 70? So it's really getting very clear on what my retirement plan is going to look like. Then from there, we want to look into things like what's our investment strategy going to look like? And what I mean by that is normally you want to have different buckets as it pertains to your investment strategy and not just have all of your money, for example, in just like your 401k. So you want to get really clear on that. Then you want to look at things like taxes and how are taxes going to affect you throughout retirement. And so normally what you want to make sure that you have is you have a tax mitigation plan in place throughout all of retirement. Because we know that if we can minimize the tax impact throughout all of retirement, it's going to allow our money to last us a lot longer during retirement, which normally is going to mean that we can live a better quality life throughout our entire retirement and at the same time leave a lasting legacy for our loved ones. Then you also want to think about things like asset protection planning. Tomorrow, if you were to get sued, what's your game plan for if that were to happen? Or if tomorrow you fall into a long-term care state, what's the plan for that? Or for whatever reason, your house were to be burned down. Like, what's the game plan for if those bad events happen? And I think that's why asset protection planning is a very critical piece. And then the 5th is estate planning, right? What does your estate plan look like? Who's going to inherit your money? At what ages are they going to be inheriting those funds? And what you don't want is you don't want to have a plan where you have all of these assets spread around, but then tomorrow you're not here. And then now you have your family fighting over your money just simply because we didn't plan things out earlier on in our retirement.
If you're following along at home, we mentioned plan a lot, and there's a reason, because you have to have a plan. There's a strategy that comes with this. I'm sure you get approached all the time by friends who are like, hey, what are the top things that I need to know? Yeah. Talk us through what is your answer? What are some of those key things with all that's out there? What are the top things we need to know?
So I think the first thing that we all need to establish is something called the freedom number. And what this means is, what's the quality of life that you want to have the day that you stop working? So Kelli, if you were to think about it this way, let's say that right now you needed $5,000 or maybe $10,000 a month to maintain your quality of life. Maybe some people out there need $30,000 a month. I met with a gentleman recently that needed almost $89,000 a month to just maintain that quality of life. So I think the first thing is asking ourselves the question, what's that quality of life that we want to have, and what does that cost us on a monthly basis? Then we grab that number, we want to multiply it by 12. That gives us our yearly number. And so once we know that, now we're going to ask ourselves the next question, well, what are the income streams that I know I can count on? Things like Social Security. If I'm going to be retiring at 67 years old, and I know that Social Security is going to give me maybe $4,000 or $5,000 between me and my spouse, then now the question is, well, do I have an income gap? Because Kelli, let's say that you needed $10,000 a month, but then your Social Security between you and your husband, let's call it's $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Then now you know you have an income gap that you need to solve. So once you know that income gap, let's call it $5,000, now what you want to establish is what's your freedom number look like. So if your number is, say, $5,000, then now the next question is, well, how much money should you have saved up for your retirement to make sure that you can keep generating that income stream throughout all of retirement?
All right, and thank you for those insights, and of course, much more to come throughout the show. Up next, Sebastian helps us through the noise of retirement planning. And later in the Guerra Freedom Minute, Sebastian looks at some of the top retirement questions of our time. All that and more straight ahead here on Retirement Ready. Stay with us.
How does your future look in retirement? When you don't have a strategy, the future might look a little fuzzy. But with someone asking the right questions and helping you learn where you truly stand, it can become easier to work toward your goals. You need a plan to help generate income that will last as long as you need it. And the first step to creating an income plan is an analysis of where you are now. Let us help you bring your retirement into focus with your free income analysis today.
So glad to have you with us on Retirement Ready. I'm Kelli Dame here with Sebastian Guerra, president and partner of Guerra Wealth Advisors. Now, Sebastian, as you know, people here in Florida, in South Florida particularly, have a lot of information that they have to sort through when it comes to retirement planning. Everyone's got an opinion and some advice. So how do you help people cut through the noise and find out what's really important?
Yeah, I think that, Kelli, one of the biggest challenges that many people go through is really trying to figure out what is real advice and what is information that we should probably be not even paying attention to. And we sometimes hear all these shiny objects and trying to hear all this different investment advice on where we should be putting our money. And sometimes we just end up putting our money into sexy investments. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that really most people end up going through, is they don't really know how to allocate their money as they're entering retirement. And somebody at a party ends up telling them that they should go put their money into the next crazy, sexy investment. But then 3 months, 3 years later, they end up realizing, why did I do that? And it was one of the biggest decisions that they were making at that moment. And this can completely destroy their entire retirement.
How do you and all of the departments as well, that you have a whole host of people behind, how do you guys bring people back down to earth, right? You don't want to make them feel like, hey, this is really not a great idea, but kind of talk me through that process of helping them through that and realizing this may not be the best option.
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that we want to be asking ourselves, is this too good to be true? Because if it is too good to be true and it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And I think that's where the biggest mistakes that people have, right? They're entering this stage of retirement and they're hearing all this different investment advice of where they should go and put their money. And you're making one of the biggest decisions with your retirement. And this can completely destroy the next 20 or 30 years of your retirement. So I think that the first thing that you want to make sure that you map out is you map out what's called a retirement income plan. And so in your retirement income plan, you want to make sure that you ask yourself the question, what are your expenses? How much money can you count on? And how long is your money going to last? But all of this needs to be documented. The challenge that we see a lot of people out there is that they have all of these accounts, they have all of these investment products, but they really don't have a strategy in place to make sure that their money lasts them for the next 20 to 30 years. And all of this needs to actually be documented in writing, not just have it in your head. And I think that's where the mistake comes in.
So when people say, okay, I'm ready to get this retirement income plan together, They come into your office. What does that process look like? Are they bringing like papers and binders? Is it just a sit down at first? Talk us through what people can expect.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we end up paying attention to is what are the needs that the person has. And when we say needs do they have some tax concerns, right? So maybe are they overpaying in taxes? Are they concerned about, hey, I'm going to retire in a couple months or maybe in a couple years, and I really don't know if I'm ready. I really don't know if I have enough money saved up. Is this money going to last me throughout all of retirement? I really don't know how much I'm going to be spending during retirement. So am I going to be spending the same thing that I spend right now? Or maybe do I plan on spending a little bit more money? You know, if you really think about what retirement really feels and looks like, it's a permanent weekend, Kelli. And what that means is, you think of what a normal week looks like. Most people work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And during those times, you're really not spending much money because you're at work every day. But then all of a sudden, from one day to the next, now you retire, and now it's a permanent weekend, which means you're now going to be spending more money throughout all of retirement because every single day is a weekend. And if every single day is a weekend, then now you're probably going to be spending more. So I think the idea is that you map all of this stuff out, right? You know all of these questions and all these answers to this, and you have it all documented. That way you can make sure that you're making this decision of retiring and you're not going to end up running out of money halfway throughout retirement.
Is this something that takes a couple days to sort through that plan, a couple weeks, couple months? Talk me through that.
Yeah, I think that this could all be done. I think that this can all be done in probably less than about an hour to hour and a half. I know it sounds a little bit crazy to hear it that way, but it really boils down to the questions that are being asked. If you have an advisor or you have an individual that you're working with and they're asking you very, very good questions, they can pretty much gather all the information that they need in about an hour, hour and a half, so that they can then present a full detailed plan on making sure, hey, how do I minimize taxes? How do I make sure that my money doesn't run out? How do I make sure that I have the proper investment mix for my retirement? But all of this stuff can be, built out in less than about an hour to 2 hours.
Okay. I think it's also interesting. We talked at the beginning of the show how your work is not done, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you're done working and you go into retirement.
Right.
And so not only is it just this initial stage, maybe taking an hour and a half, but you want to revisit your plan regularly, right? It's not a whole set it and forget it type situation.
Yeah.
How often do you recommend people come in and have those conversations?
So I think that one of the first things that people should do, and I see this happen all the time, is that people say things like, well, I already have an advisor, or I've been working with someone for many, many years. But the question is, at the end of every meeting that you're having with your advisor, do you get a detailed report on how you're doing and how your situation has changed since the last time you met? So normally we recommend people to be meeting with their advisors every 3 to 6 months. It all depends on the complexity of the situation. But if you are getting a detailed report on where you were 3 months ago and where you are today, and how does this project out into the future, it can give you a lot more confidence about the way your future is going to look like. But nobody wants to be in the middle of retirement or maybe a couple of years away from retirement and really not know how they're doing in comparison to how it's going to affect them in the future. And I think that's where the biggest challenge that people go through. They really don't know. And they're just meeting with an advisor and they're just having a conversation about money, but there really isn't a detailed plan behind that conversation and it all being mapped out.
But by the way, at Guerra Wealth Advisors, there is not just an advisor you're working with, right? It's a little different.
Yeah. So I think that when you're meeting with an advisor, it's not so much the conversation of, hey, how am I doing? But it's you want to make sure that you're working with a full team that focuses on different areas. So, I think what makes us a little bit different at Guerra Wealth Advisors is we have an entire team that specializes in different areas, right? So we have an investment management team that focuses on investment and portfolio management. We have a tax strategy team that helps on tax mitigation and tax reduction. We also have an estate and legal team to make sure that your entire estate plan is mapped out. Your wills, your trusts, all of this stuff is documented because when you're building out an entire plan, it's not just only about investments, it's about the entire financial plan.
Well, up next, Sebastian shares his take on some of the top retirement questions of our time. That is straight ahead in the Guerra Freedom Minute. And later, Sebastian tackles some of your biggest retirement questions. Don't miss it. That's coming up. We'll be right back.
On the surface, your retirement plan might look solid. With your 401k or IRA, Social Security, investments, and insurance coverage, you appear to have it all covered. But what could you be missing? Below the surface, is your retirement exposed to too much risk? It's time for a deeper dive into your portfolio. We can help you uncover the risk that lies beneath the surface and learn about strategies to help preserve your savings. Get your free risk analysis today.
When it comes to investing for retirement, there is a lot to know, and it's easy to get confused. The good news is Sebastian is going to take a look at some of the top retirement questions out there and shed some light for us. Sebastian.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I know that a lot of you have these questions, especially as you're entering this stage of retirement. And one of the questions that we get asked from many families and many individuals is, how much money should I have saved up at my age? And I wouldn't say that there's a specific number. You know, some people throw out numbers like I need 500,000, or maybe I need $1 million, or maybe I need 3 million to retire. And it really doesn't matter that specific number. What really matters is, what is your freedom number? And the way you want to go about building out your freedom number is you first want to ask yourself the question, how much money do you need on a monthly basis to maintain the quality of life that you're accustomed to today? Is that number $5,000 a month, $8,000 a month, $10,000 a month? Maybe it's $30,000 a month, but you want to make sure that you know that number. Once you know that number, now the next question is, well, do you have any other sort of guaranteed streams of income? Social Security, pensions, and then find out what your gap is. Maybe your gap is $5,000 a month. And so once you know your gap, now you want to grab that number, you want to multiply it by about 15 to 20, and then that will tell you the amount of money that you should have saved up before you retire. The other question that we get asked is, if I have a 401k and it's going down in value because maybe the stock market's going down, should I stop putting money into the accounts if the stock market is crashing on us? And I think that obviously everybody looks at it from a different angle, but unfortunately many people are very reactive versus very strategic. And what I mean by that is that when the market is crashing, those are the moments where many people are actually looking at that as a buying opportunity. Meaning, instead of putting money in when the stock market's high, they're looking at it from a different angle. I can now be investing money into my retirement accounts, into my investment accounts while the stock market is low. And if I'm planning on retiring maybe in 5 or 10 or 15 years, it might not be a bad idea. But again, you want to make sure that you're having these conversations with your financial planning team just to make sure that you're making the right decisions for your retirement. So the other question is, should I be timing the market? I can't tell you how many people are always coming into our office and they're saying things like, I should be definitely putting the money into the stock market right now because of X and Y reason. And I can tell you that this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make as it pertains to investing. The majority of the data tells us that if you go and deposit money into your investment accounts over time and you're not trying to time the market, and as soon as you have the money, you're depositing it into your investment accounts, there's a higher likelihood that you'll have more money in the future than if you're trying to time the market. This is why a lot of people that are trying to implement this strategy, over time, they don't end up winning. The ones that end up winning over time are the ones that are depositing money into their investment accounts, no matter if the stock market is low or the stock market is high. They're just being consistent in their deposits into their investment accounts. The other question is, how can I make sure that my spouse will be okay if tomorrow I'm not here? And we see this happen with a lot of families out there, right? You might want to assign your child or your children as beneficiaries. And many times when you unfortunately pass away and you have your children assigned as beneficiaries, that means that all of the money is going to end up going to your children. And the question is, will your spouse be okay if something like that happens? Because if you go and give half of your money, say, to your child when you pass away, but your spouse needed that money for their retirement, this can potentially destroy their retirement. And now your spouse might have to go back to your children to ask them for that money back. And this also happens a lot with real estate. If you have rental properties or investment properties, and now you probably put your children on those properties as well, this might cause some very big problems with your spouse having to go back to your children just to potentially get control of that property as well. The other question that I get asked all the time is, when should I start taking Social Security? And this is a very big question, but it really depends on when you're planning on passing away. Unfortunately, most of us have no idea when we're going to pass away, but there's two ways to look at this. There's an emotional way and then there's a logical way. And if you're looking at this from an emotional standpoint, then yes, many of us just want to get that Social Security check as early as we possibly can. But when you really start breaking down the numbers and you start thinking of something called the break-even point, what you'll notice is that by you waiting and getting your Social Security check, yes, you'll get more money by waiting, but you're also missing out on time. So when you add up the money between now that say you're 62 years old and let's say 67 years old, there's a 5-year difference there. And so by you waiting and getting that check, you're missing out on 5 years of checks. The question is, how long will it take for you to recover that money if you decided to wait? And when you factor in time value of money and you factor in that money could be earning money for you throughout all of retirement, the break-even point sometimes is over 20 years. So you really want to make sure that you're making the right decision when you're deciding on when to collect Social Security. Back to you, Kelli.
All right, thanks, Sebastian. Coming up, Sebastian answers some of your most pressing retirement questions in our Q&A segment. That's straight ahead. You're watching Retirement Ready.
When it comes to planning for the future, time may not always be on your side. Think about your taxes. Tax rates are historically low right now, but they'll likely be higher in the future. With the right planning and strategy, you might be able to cut your tax bill in the years to come. But don't wait until it's too late to take advantage of today's lower tax rates. Let us be your partner in planning for tomorrow so you can enjoy your retirement today.
And now we want to take some time to answer a few of your specific questions about finances and retirement planning. I always love this portion of the show. You're in the hot seat. Are you ready?
Let's see.
Okay, we will see. So Maria in Coral Gables asks, I'm less than a year away from retiring. I have retirement accounts and I've been working with a broker for years. I guess I've never considered how taxes will affect me. Once I start taking my withdrawals, how will I be taxed?
So I think that one of the things that probably Maria should probably be thinking about is, yes, taxes is going to be a very big impact during retirement. But if you really know how to use your 3 tax buckets really, really well, you can drastically reduce your tax impact massively. And when I say the 3 tax buckets, it's normally classified as accounts that are tax deferred, things like IRAs and 401ks, 403bs, TSPs. These are all accounts that haven't been taxed yet. Things like after tax accounts, things like, savings accounts, checking accounts, brokerage accounts, and then also accounts that are tax free, such as like Roth IRAs and municipal bonds. So when you're using these 3 different tax buckets in a very efficient way, and now you know how to withdraw money out of each tax bucket at the right amount on a yearly basis, you can keep your tax bracket really, really low. And I think that one of the challenges that maybe Maria will probably go through is that if she has all of her money, for example, in a tax deferred account like a 401k or an IRA, she will only have one choice on where she can withdraw money when she needs money. And so I think that one of the things that she should consider is having enough money in each of those buckets. So that way, when she's entering retirement, she's just not blindly just taking all of the money out of one account. And instead, she's strategically taking a certain amount out of each bucket to keep her tax bracket lower.
So Maria, you are right to be thinking about this, and clearly a plan is warranted for sure, and a conversation. Well, Mike in South Miami asks, my wife and I are lucky enough to have retired comfortably, but are concerned with our 2 adult children. They just aren't ready to fully launch out on their own. It's going to start eating into our savings to continue to support them. So how do we help our children without harming our retirement?
So Kelli, this one's a pretty interesting question. So it kind of reminds me back of the way I was raised. At 18 years old, my dad ends up telling me that I have to start paying rent in the house. At 19 years old, he increases the rent from $500 a month to $1,000 a month. So I would say that, Mike, I would probably tell you, if you really want your kids to be frustrated with you for a little bit, then you might want to increase the rent on him. But that's what my father did with me. I definitely would say that you want to be very careful in how much you're helping your children, especially as you're getting closer and closer to retirement, because a lot of retirees don't really stop and think about the fact that they want to go and help their children in the best way that they can. They want to give them the best possible life, but they're not really thinking about how this can affect them 5, 10, 20 years into the future. And sometimes when you go and help your children by, paying for their college education or buying them their cars and all these different expenses, even though we want to help them out, I think that this can create very negative impact long term if you don't have enough saved up for retirement. So it's not so much whether you should help your children out. My father did something a little bit different with me, but I will say that you want to make sure that you're factoring all of these elements in as you're planning out retirement and not just giving your children money without thinking of the long-term consequences of that.
Dad wanted to give you some reality. I think it turned out okay.
Yeah, it was okay.
All right.
Kind of.
Debatable. Christina in Pinecrest says, I'm 63 years old, and all of my life I've been investing consistently, including in my 403B at work. My advisor says I'm doing great, not to worry about retirement, but I feel like it's time for a more solid plan. What should I do?
So Christina, the first thing I think that you want to make sure that you're looking at is not whether you only have enough money saved up for retirement, but you really want to look at the 5 major risks that can completely destroy your retirement and how to make sure that you have a plan if any of those things happen, right? So the first one that we look at is market risk. What happens if the stock market crashes and you're ready to retire in a couple years? If the stock market drops 40 or 50%, is that going to affect your retirement, especially if a lot of your money saved up inside investment accounts that are invested in the stock market? The other thing you want to think about is inflation. What happens if, 5 or 10 years into the future, now expenses that you have today have been doubled. And today you can live on 10,000, but just 10 years from now, you now need 20,000 if we're looking at a 6 or 7% inflation. So you want to make sure you're factoring that in. Also taxes, right? What happens if tax rates go up 5, 10, or 15% into the future? So if that does end up happening, that means that you have to now withdraw more money out of your investment accounts just to make sure that you can pay your bills on a monthly basis. Then you want to think about things like healthcare, right? What happens if you're 82, 83 years old? Who's going to take care of you at that stage of life? And then the last is longevity, right? And so we all talk about, yes, we want to live as long as possible, but we want to make sure that we're living as long as possible healthy. And if you happen to live a very long life, you want to make sure that you have enough money saved up in your retirement to carry you through all the way until the end stage of life.
All right, Sophia in Kendall says, I'm 55. I own a small but successful local business. I'd like to sell the business and retire soon. I'm still young. I'll have to pay for healthcare once I step away from the business. What is the best way to plan for this?
Yeah. So, Sophia, I think one of the first things you want to make sure you're paying attention to is, from a tax standpoint, how is the sale of the business going to affect you? Because if tomorrow you turn around and sell the business for, say, $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million, you want to also think of, okay, what are going to be the tax consequences in the moment of the sale? Are you going to end up losing 20, 23% of the entire sale of the business just simply because you didn't plan out the subject of taxes? But it's not only taxes, it's also how is that going to affect you from a healthcare standpoint when it comes to premiums? Because when you end up turning around and selling your business for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, this can also affect your ability to be able to qualify for ACA subsidy, which is, in other words, just the ability to get help from the government to pay for healthcare needs. And if you don't have a plan in place on how to minimize that, this can cause your premiums to drastically go up, especially if you're entering this stage of retirement.
The hot seat has nothing on you. Thanks for those insights, Sebastian.
Thank you so much, Kelli.
And if you want to know ways to help generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, reach out now to start planning for your ideal retirement. For Sebastian Guerra of Guerra Wealth Advisors, I'm Kelli Dame. Have a great day and an even better retirement.
The preceding program was sponsored by Guerra Wealth Advisors.